Before we dive into today's story, I have a question for you. Imagine standing face to face with the galaxy's deadliest apex predator. Would you run, fight, or command it? Let me know your choice in the comments below. And if you love intense sci-fi tales where humans rise above impossible odds, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss these cinematic HFY stories that drop every week. Your support keeps these epic tales coming. Now, let's begin. The arena trembled under the deafening roars of thousands of alien spectators. From the highest terraces to the obsidian steps closest to the volcanic pit, they howled and clashed their armored limbs in anticipation. The air smelled of sulfur, plasma fuel, and blood long dried into the black stone. "Look at him," growled Chief Hogar, his scaled lips peeling back to reveal rows of jagged teeth. "So fragile. He'll make a fine snack for Krorax." Beside him, Chief Duron snorted. The massive tusked mammalian alien shifted his weight, armored plates clanking over thick fur as he leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight below. "Snack? He's not even worth licking out of its teeth." Chief Velkun clicked his mandibles irritably, adjusting the ceremonial harness across his thorax. "Let's get this spectacle over with. There are other challengers to torment today." Chained at the center of the arena stood Marcus. He was human, tall for his species, lean yet muscled, with tan skin marked by faded scars across his forearms and collarbones. His close-cropped dark hair bristled slightly in the dry volcanic winds, and his steel-gray eyes reflected none of the fear the war chiefs expected. A guard, its heavy gait rattling the iron floor, shoved Marcus forward with the butt of a shock pike. He stumbled but did not fall. Instead, he straightened, rolling his shoulders back and glancing briefly over each guard's stance and weapon grip before settling his gaze on the war chiefs far above. "He said nothing. He didn't need to. Humans?" Chief Hogar barked, his voice amplified through a skull-embedded translator node. "They breed them to think they're warriors. But watch now. Watch as Krorax teaches this one the truth of his place in the cosmos." From the terraces came a thunderous chant in dozens of alien tongues, unified into a single word that pulsed through the volcanic pit like the beating of war drums. "Krorax! Krorax! Krorax!" Marcus barely flicked his eyes at the frenzied crowd. Instead, he lowered his gaze to the iron sand beneath his boots, flexing his ankles against the weight of his chains. Heat rose from the fissures that snaked across the arena floor, searing into his calves. Sweat beaded at his hairline but his breathing remained measured. He counted the guards, 6 at the gate behind him, 4 more lining the walls with plasma rifles braced. He noted the war chief's positions on the platform, 100 feet above, yet exposed along their balcony's front edge. Marcus memorized the details out of habit. It wouldn't matter soon. He just preferred to know. The chanting intensified as the war chiefs raised their arms in unison. Duron's guttural voice boomed across the Colosseum. "Bring forth the apex predator." With a groaning, grinding echo, massive iron doors rumbled open at the far end of the pit. Darkness billowed out, thick with the scent of scorched bone and raw meat. Chains rattled within the shadow, then the crowd fell silent as an immense silhouette shifted forward. The creature that emerged stood taller than any war beast Marcus had ever faced. Its armored hide was obsidian black, gleaming with oil and blood. Muscles rippled beneath overlapping plates, each movement silent yet thundering with latent power. Twin molten red eyes glared beneath its horned brow as it lowered its massive head and sniffed the scorching air. A low rumble rolled from its chest, a sound so deep it vibrated Marcus's ribs. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing jagged fangs as long as his forearm, slick with black saliva that hissed where it struck the burning stone. The war chiefs began to laugh. Harsh, cruel sounds echoed across the arena walls. Chief Velkun's mandibles snapped in amusement. "Watch it rip him in half," he chittered. "Perhaps it will play with his corpse like a doll before devouring him." Marcus raised his eyes to the predator. For a long moment the world vanished, the alien roars faded, the heat of the pit dulled. All he saw were those eyes, watching him with a gleam not of hunger but of recognition. His breath caught. The memory flooded back unbidden. He was 19 again, stranded on a jungle moon after a shuttle crash. Alone, starving, half-mad from the toxic spores coating the alien foliage. Then he'd heard it, a youngling's howl of pain. He'd found it there, no taller than his chest back then, its forelimb shattered from a trap coil, its black hide torn and bleeding onto the ferns. Instead of ending its misery as protocol demanded, Marcus had spent 3 weeks setting its bone with scavenged carbon splints, hunting for the rare fungus that calmed its system, risking venomous insect swarms to gather water for its fevered nights. He'd named it Shadowfang. And in those silent humid dawns, it had rested its great scaled head against his leg as he carved traps and whispered stories of home it could never understand. Now here it stood again, grown into a titan of alien nightmares. Marcus exhaled slowly and dropped to one knee. Around him, the arena rippled with confusion. The guards tensed. The war chiefs leaned forward in disbelief. The predator tilted its head, nostrils flaring. Its great claws dug into the iron sand as it lumbered forward. Every step thundered, yet it moved with deadly grace until its shadow swallowed Marcus entirely. It lowered its massive head, snout inches from his chest. Its nostrils flared again, breathing in his scent. The molten eyes blinked once, twice. Then the apex predator bent its forelegs and lowered its massive body to the ground before him, its horned brow brushing the scorched sand. Silence. Absolute ringing silence. A hiss of static broke from Chief Hogar's translator node. What is it doing? Marcus rose slowly to his feet, lifting his hand to brush his fingers along the predator's armored cheek. Its eyes closed under his touch, a low rumble of contentment vibrating through its ribs. He turned his head upward, steel-gray gaze locking onto the three war chiefs staring down in speechless shock. They called forth their doom, Marcus said softly, voice carrying eerily across the quieted arena. But they only summoned an old friend. Far above, Chief Duron snarled and slammed his clawed fist into the railing. End them both, he roared, his voice cracking through the stunned silence. Kill them now. As the guards raised their plasma rifles, Shadowfang's molten eyes snapped open. Its snarl ripped the silence apart, a sound so feral that even the war chiefs flinched. Marcus smiled faintly, a scar on his cheek twitching. He kept his hand resting calmly against the great creature's hide as he spoke, low and cold. Come on then. Around the volcanic arena, alarms began to blare as Shadowfang rose to its full height, towering over the soldiers who now trembled behind their weapons. And for those of you watching right now, tell me, what would you do if the galaxy's most feared apex predator knelt only to you? Let me know in the comments below, like if you felt the chills when Shadowfang recognized Marcus, and subscribe if you want to see how this battle unfolds in the next chapter. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Shadowfang's roar shook the heavens as the war chiefs stared down at the human they once mocked, and realized too late that this was no prey standing before them. For a heartbeat, the arena remained locked in stunned silence. Even the volcanic wind seemed to hush as Shadowfang stood protectively before Marcus, its armored hide bristling with tension, molten eyes scanning the ring of armed guards surrounding them. Marcus shifted his stance, rolling his shoulders to loosen the iron chains that bound his wrists. The heavy links clinked against his forearm scars as he adjusted his footing on the scorched black sand, feeling the vibrating hum of Shadowfang's growl resonate up through his boots. Fire! Screamed Chief Duron from above, his tusked face twisted in fury. A volley of plasma bolts screamed through the air. Shadowfang moved before Marcus could react, its massive armored flank absorbing the blasts with sizzling flashes of blue light and scorched smoke. The predator snarled, rearing up onto its hind legs. With a single sweep of its claws, it smashed an entire line of guards into the stone walls like ragdolls, their weapons clattering lifeless to the sand. Marcus exhaled slowly, watching the creature he had raised and nurtured rip through the alien ranks with terrifying precision. There was no wild rage in Shadowfang's movements, only the efficient lethality of a predator protecting its pack. Its pack, Marcus realized, had always been him. From the balcony above, Chief Velkun clicked his mandibles in panic. Seal the gates. Do not let them leave this arena alive. His voice cracked into a shrill chittering as he scrambled back from the railing. Heavy iron gates began to descend at each exit, slamming down with seismic force. Shadowfang turned its massive head toward Marcus, nostrils flaring with ragged breath. Marcus met its molten gaze and nodded once. Go, he whispered. Shadowfang lunged at the nearest gate. Its claws, each the size of Marcus's forearm, bit into the reinforced metal. With a guttural roar, it tore the gate from its track, ripping it free and tossing the twisted slab aside. The creature surged forward, trampling two more guards who had attempted to flank Marcus with shock pikes. Marcus bent swiftly to retrieve one of their plasma rifles. He checked its charge cell, nearly full. Good. Swinging it over his shoulder, he sprinted after Shadowfang, weaving between fallen alien corpses and shattered weaponry. Heat from the fractured plasma coils burned his calves, but he ignored it, eyes locked on Shadowfang's towering silhouette ahead. Beyond the gate, The Colosseum's underground corridors stretched out in harsh orange lamplight. Sirens wailed overhead as security shutters slammed down across the exits, but Shadowfang moved with unstoppable momentum, smashing aside every barrier as if they were paper walls. Marcus kept close behind, pulse steady, scanning corners for hidden guards or automated turrets. Shadowfang halted suddenly, its nostrils flaring. Marcus slid to a stop beside its massive shoulder, raising his rifle in the dim light. Ahead, the corridor widened into an enormous loading chamber. Dozens of alien soldiers had assembled there, armored in bronze plating and bristling with heavy weapons. Behind them loomed the silhouette of a figure in obsidian exo-armor, Chief Hogar, scales glinting beneath the flickering lamps. "You will go no further, human," Hogar growled, his voice amplified by the helmet encasing his snout. Plasma surged along the shaft of his two-handed battle axe. "You think yourself a beast tamer. But you are only prey delaying its slaughter." Marcus didn't respond. He shifted his stance, placing one hand against Shadowfang's armored shoulder and feeling the vibrations of its deep rumbling growl. The creature's molten eyes narrowed as it lowered its massive head, glaring at the armored war chief. "Kill them," Hogar roared. The chamber erupted into chaos. Plasma bolts streaked through the smoky air, ricocheting off Shadowfang's armored hide. The predator barreled forward with a roar, its claws slicing through the front ranks of alien soldiers like wheat before a scythe. Marcus followed in its wake, dropping into a low sprint and firing precise plasma bursts into exposed gaps between enemy armor plates. One alien fell with its throat seared open, another collapsed clutching a scorched chest cavity. The rifle hummed hot in Marcus's grip as he pivoted around Shadowfang's swaying tail, using the beast's massive form as a living shield. Hogar lunged forward, his plasma axe humming with lethal power. The massive reptilian alien moved with brutal speed despite his exo-armor, closing the distance in 3 thunderous strides. He swung the axe down in a crackling arc aimed to cleave Shadowfang's head in half. But Marcus was already moving. He slid beneath Shadowfang's torso, rolled over his shoulder, and rose behind Hogar with his plasma rifle aimed square at the exposed power core glowing between the armor plates of the war chief's back. He squeezed the trigger twice. Twin bolts of white-hot plasma slammed into the core. For a split second, Hogar froze mid-swing. Then the power cell erupted with a concussive explosion, shredding half his back armor and flinging him forward. Shadowfang lunged, jaws gaping wide. Its serrated fangs closed around Hogar's chest and shoulders. There was a sharp metallic crunch, then silence. Shadowfang shook its head once, casting aside the limp corpse with contempt. The surviving alien soldiers stumbled back, weapons trembling. Some dropped their rifles entirely. Marcus rose slowly, plasma rifle held loosely at his side, his chest heaving as he surveyed the chamber. Shadowfang rumbled softly and pressed its massive snout against his shoulder. Marcus reached up and stroked the creature's armored cheek, feeling the heat radiating from its scales. High above, sirens continued to scream through the Colosseum. Marcus glanced back down the corridor they had come from, then at the torn gate Shadowfang had breached. More soldiers would come. More weapons, more traps, more war chiefs. But for now, in this blood-soaked chamber filled with charred corpses and flickering lights, there was silence. He rested his forehead briefly against Shadowfang's massive jaw, closing his eyes as memories of that jungle moon flickered through his mind, the night spent curled against its trembling body, whispering that everything would be okay, promising it would never be alone again. "Not bad for a reunion, huh?" he murmured. Shadowfang's molten eyes blinked once, its nostrils flaring as if in agreement. Marcus stepped back, tightening his grip on the plasma rifle as he surveyed the far end of the chamber. Beyond another descending security shutter, daylight gleamed in a harsh white line where the gate hadn't fully closed. He turned his gaze upward to the security cameras mounted in each corner, their lenses flickering red in the gloom. Somewhere behind those lenses, the surviving war chiefs watched. He raised his plasma rifle in a silent salute, then turned back to Shadowfang. "Let's finish this." Shadowfang growled low, the sound vibrating the broken stone underfoot, and began walking toward the exit. Marcus followed close beside it, his footsteps silent against the predator's thunderous tread. Behind them, the lifeless body of Chief Hogar lay sprawled among the smoking corpses of his soldiers. Overhead, the sirens screamed louder, echoing their rage and panic across the Colosseum's metal bones. But Marcus didn't hear them anymore. All he heard was the steady thump of Shadowfang's massive paws against the ground, and the quiet beat of his own heart, calm and resolute. They would come for him with everything they had. He knew it. And he welcomed it. Because now they weren't just facing a human. They were facing the galaxy's most feared apex predator, and the man it bowed to. Shadowfang's massive shoulders rolled with each silent step, its armored hide brushing against the narrowing corridor walls as they advanced toward the faint white glow ahead. Marcus moved beside its foreleg, plasma rifle braced across his chest, eyes scanning every shadow and vent shaft above them. He felt the faint tremble in the volcanic stone beneath their boots, a distant vibration that pulsed in rhythm with the wailing sirens overhead. They reached the half-closed security shutter. Marcus pressed his hand against the seam where daylight spilled into the gloom, feeling the icy rush of surface winds curl around his fingers. He crouched, peering under the heavy metal barrier, noting the slope of the landing pad beyond and the faint glimmer of alien transport skiffs moored near the Colosseum's outer towers. Shadowfang growled low, its molten eyes flicking between the shutter and Marcus. The predator shifted, its enormous claws sparking as they dug into the iron floor. Marcus patted its leg twice. "Not yet," he murmured. Behind them the tremor grew stronger. A deep pounding thudded through the walls, accompanied by the rising clank and hiss of mechanical servos. Marcus turned, his rifle raised as heavy armored footsteps echoed down the corridor. Emerging from the smoke and flickering lights came Chief Duron. His tusks gleamed wetly beneath the slitted visor of his exo-armor helmet, and the seismic hammer in his massive gauntlet fists crackled with electric arcs. Behind him marched a phalanx of alien guards clad in bronze-segmented plating, plasma rifles leveled in unison. Duron's rumbling voice boomed down the corridor. "Impressive tricks, human. Taming an apex predator. Slaying a war chief. But your illusions end here." Marcus rose slowly to his feet, rolling his shoulders as he settled into a stable firing stance. Shadowfang growled, bristling its armored hackles until its bulk filled nearly the entire width of the passage. Duron lifted his hammer and pointed it at Marcus. "You die now, prey. And your beast dies screaming beside you." Marcus narrowed his steel-gray eyes. His voice came out low and calm. "Try it." Duron roared and charged. The seismic hammer swung in a wide arc, trailing sparks as it smashed into the wall where Marcus had stood a heartbeat before. The human rolled aside, plasma rifle barking 3 precise shots into Duron's side armor. The bolts seared smoking gouges into the plates but didn't pierce through. The massive alien turned with shocking speed, hammer lifted to swing again. Shadowfang lunged, jaws gaping wide. Duron pivoted and slammed his hammer down onto the predator's snout. The blow reverberated through the corridor like a thunderclap, forcing Shadowfang's head down as its molten eyes flared with rage. The creature snarled and reared back, its claws slashing out to gouge 3 jagged furrows through Duron's chest plating. The war chief staggered, tusks dripping with spittle as he bellowed and swung his hammer sideways. The weapon crashed into Shadowfang's shoulder, knocking the massive beast into the corridor wall. Cracks spiderwebbed through the iron as Shadowfang roared in pain and fury. Marcus moved again, diving behind Duron's armored legs. He dropped into a slide, rifle raised, aiming for the exposed power coupling at the base of the hammer's shaft. He fired once. The plasma bolt struck true. Sparks exploded from the joint as the hammer's energy field flickered. Duron spun with terrifying speed, reaching down to grab Marcus with his free gauntlet. His massive clawed fingers closed around Marcus's torso, lifting him from the ground with bone-crushing force. Marcus grit his teeth as his ribs creaked under the pressure. "You die here, little prey," Duron growled, saliva bubbling from his tusks. His other hand raised the hammer high, its damaged power cell still crackling with flickering arcs. Marcus drew in a sharp breath, ignoring the burning pain across his ribs. His eyes flicked to Shadowfang, who was already rising to its feet, molten eyes narrowed to glowing slits. "Now!" Marcus shouted. Shadowfang lunged, jaws gaping impossibly wide, and clamped down on the seismic hammer's shaft just as Duron brought it down. The damaged power cell sparked violently under Shadowfang's crushing bite. For a single frozen moment, the war chief's tusked face twisted from triumph to sudden horror. Then the power core exploded with a blinding white flash. The blast waved through Marcus backward down the corridor, slamming him into Shadowfang's armored shoulder. He collapsed to the floor, coughing smoke from his lungs. His vision flickered black before resolving again. Duron's entire upper torso was gone. Shattered exo-armor fragments clattered across the corridor floor, and his tusked helmet lay smoking and empty against the far wall. His lower body crumpled limply onto the floor as Shadowfang stepped back, shaking molten shards from its jaws. For a moment, The corridor fell silent except for the distant wail of alarms and the soft crackle of electrical fires. Marcus rose unsteadily, clutching his side where bruised ribs burned with every breath. He looked up at Shadowfang, who blinked once and rumbled softly, pressing its armored snout against his chest in relief. Behind the fallen war chief, the phalanx of alien guards hesitated, weapons trembling. Shadowfang turned its molten gaze upon them and growled, the sound rolling like thunder through the corridor. Without a word, the guards dropped their rifles and fled back down the passage, their armored boots clattering in panicked retreat. Marcus turned to face the half-closed security shutter. Sunlight still gleamed through the seam where it hadn't fully sealed. He exhaled slowly, forcing down the pain in his side, and approached the shutter controls mounted on the wall. Sparks flickered across the console from stray plasma bolts earlier in the fight, but the override lever remained intact. He grasped it and pulled. The shutter jerked upward, squealing against its warp track before it rose high enough to reveal the landing pad beyond. Cold daylight flooded the corridor, washing over Marcus and Shadowfang as they stepped forward into the open air. The surface winds lashed at his sweat-soaked hair. Beyond the pad lay the alien city, black spires rising over a horizon of volcanic plains, the sky streaked with sulfur clouds and flickering lightning. Rows of transport skiffs and armored hovercraft waited near the Colosseum towers. Alarms wailed from sirens embedded in the basalt walls, echoing across the towers like screaming banshees. Marcus turned his gaze upward. On the tallest balcony above the arena, Chief Velkun stood alone. The insectoid war chief's mandibles quivered as he watched Marcus and Shadowfang emerge from the tunnel. Even at this distance, Marcus could see the trembling in his spindly arms. Shadowfang rumbled softly beside him, molten eyes locked on Velkun with a predator's cold, unblinking focus. Marcus lifted his plasma rifle, resting its barrel across his shoulder. He narrowed his steel-gray eyes at Velkun and allowed a faint smile to tug at his scarred cheek. "Run," he said quietly. Velkun spun and vanished from the balcony, his shrill clicks echoing into the storm-racked sky. Shadowfang snorted, a sound like distant thunder, and lowered its massive head. Marcus stepped forward, resting his palm against its armored cheek, feeling the vibrating warmth of the creature's breath against his forearm. The wind roared across the landing pad, whipping his torn shirt against his ribs and carrying the scent of sulfur and scorched metal. Above them, alien gunships were rising from distant towers, their engines glowing blue as they angled toward the Colosseum. Marcus drew in a slow breath and met Shadowfang's molten gaze. "They're coming," he whispered. Shadowfang blinked once as if in calm agreement. Marcus turned his eyes back to the black spires and the approaching gunships, feeling the familiar weight of purpose settle into his chest. "Let them." The predator rumbled low, its tail lashing against the landing pad's scorched surface, and together they faced the darkening sky as the war chiefs gathered their final fury for what would come next. Wind roared across the landing pad, carrying the reek of sulfur and scorched metal from the volcanic plains beyond the city. Marcus stood with his plasma rifle resting lightly in his grip, boots planted firm against the trembling concrete as Shadowfang shifted beside him, its armored hide rippling under the gathering storm clouds. Thunder rolled in the distance, muffled by the deep rumble of approaching gunships. Above the towers, 3 assault craft cut through the swirling ash clouds. Their engines pulsed with blue light, casting eerie shadows across the basalt ramparts. Plasma cannons rotated beneath their noses, tracking Marcus and the massive predator at his side. Shadowfang lifted its head, molten eyes narrowing as it watched the craft's approach. Its nostrils flared, inhaling the acrid winds as if scenting the fear carried within them. Marcus reached up and brushed his fingertips along the beast's armored cheek. Its scales were hot to the touch, vibrating faintly with a low growl building deep within its chest. He turned his gaze upward to the balcony where Chief Velkun cowered behind a phalanx of guards. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the insectoid alien's mandibles trembling. The war chief stepped forward, gesturing with a spindly claw. A translator node clicked at his throat, amplifying his chittering voice over the landing pad. "Human," Velkun screeched, his black eyes reflecting the flickering plasma cannons of the gunships. "Surrender yourself. Your beast will be dissected for research and your death will be swift. Resist and you will both be reduced to ash." Marcus raised his rifle and sighted down its barrel. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, though his eyes were locked on Velkun rather than the gunships descending around him. The war chief flinched, stepping back behind his guards. Shadowfang shifted its massive forepaws, claws digging gouges into the landing pad surface. It rumbled softly, the sound vibrating through Marcus's chest. The Predator's molten eyes glowed brighter as the gunship's targeting lasers crawled across its armored hide. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the raw wind whip through his hair. The chaos of the last hour replayed in flashes behind his eyes. The jeering war chiefs, the smell of iron sand in the arena, Shadowfang lowering its great head before him, the thunderous silence that followed. He stepped forward, standing at Shadowfang's side. The creature lowered its massive head until its snout brushed his shoulder. He could feel the heat of its breath against his cheek, the subtle shiver in its flanks as it waited for his command. He raised his voice, clear and calm against the howling wind. "You think plasma rifles and gunships will stop an apex predator?" His eyes narrowed, steel-gray and unflinching. "You think I would come this far just to kneel?" Velkun hesitated, his mandibles twitching. He gestured sharply to the gunships. Plasma cannons rotated, charging with shrill electric whines. Marcus inhaled sharply and shouted, "Now!" Shadowfang lunged forward with explosive force. Its claws tore across the landing pad, cracking the concrete as it surged toward the first gunship. Plasma bolts hammered down around it, searing into its armored hide and exploding in showers of molten slag. The Predator roared, a sound so deafening it shook the towers themselves. It leapt, impossibly massive yet graceful, and smashed into the gunship's cockpit with its armored skull. The craft spun sideways in the air, its engines screaming as it spiraled out of control and slammed into the tower's lower terraces in a blossom of blue fire. Marcus ran beneath Shadowfang's shadow, plasma rifle raised. He fired controlled bursts at the second gunship's underbelly as it banked away, scouring its maneuvering thrusters with sizzling plasma. The craft juddered, engines flickering before it pitched violently to one side and slammed into the landing pad. Its plasma cannons exploded, showering the pad in smoking debris. The third gunship rose higher, retreating from the Predator's reach. Shadowfang snarled, pacing beneath it, claws shredding steel as it circled. Marcus turned his gaze to Velkun above. The war chief trembled behind his guards, mandibles clicking in panic. Marcus raised his rifle and fired a single bolt into the balcony's railing. The plasma burst shattered the stone in an explosion of molten shards. Guards screamed and stumbled back. Velkun fell to his knees, chittering frantically into his comm unit. Shadowfang reared onto its hind legs, towering over the balcony's edge. Its molten eyes locked onto Velkun and it roared. The war chief shrieked, scrambling to his feet and fleeing back into the tower's shadowed hallways. Marcus lowered his rifle. His chest heaved with ragged breath, his ribs burning from the fight with Duron, but his grip remained steady. He watched as Shadowfang dropped back onto all fours with a thunderous crash, exhaling a blast of heat that curled the ash swirling around its snout. Silence fell across the landing pad, broken only by the crackle of burning wreckage. Marcus turned slowly, surveying the shattered gunships and the collapsed balcony above. His gaze drifted to Shadowfang, who stood in the billowing smoke, its massive chest rising and falling with each rumbling breath. He stepped forward and pressed his palm to the creature's armored cheek. Its molten eyes blinked once, focusing on him with a warmth that belied its monstrous size. He remembered the jungle moon once more, the night spent feeding it scraps of protein ration, the dawn spent cleaning its wounds with trembling hands, promising it a freedom neither of them believed in back then. But here they stood. Not as prey or predator, but as equals. As family. Behind them, distant alarms rose again, echoing across the towers. New transports would come. New war chiefs, new soldiers, new weapons designed to end what they could not control. Marcus turned to face the horizon. Storm clouds gathered over the volcanic plains, lit from beneath by molten rivers winding between jagged black ridges. Lightning forked silently above them, illuminating Shadowfang's armored silhouette in stark white flashes. He rested his forehead against its jaw, feeling its rough scales warm beneath the cold rain that had begun to fall. The creature rumbled softly, curling its massive claws into the cracked concrete as if to ground itself against the coming storm. Marcus closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of scorched stone and sulfur-laced rain. He felt no fear, only the steady thrum of his own heartbeat and the familiar warmth of the creature at his side. He pulled back and looked up into its molten eyes. "This isn't over," he whispered. Shadowfang blinked once, slowly, and lowered its massive head in silent agreement. The wind tore across the landing pad, whipping his hair back as the rain fell harder. Thunder rumbled across the horizon, shaking the towers to their foundations. Marcus turned away from the ruined gunships, from the shattered balcony, from the fleeing war chief whose terror would echo through the alien halls for years to come. He walked toward the edge of the landing pad, where the stairs descended into the black spires of the city below. Shadowfang followed him, each step shaking the pad beneath its armored paws. Together they moved into the storm, disappearing beneath the howling winds and falling rain, leaving only silence in their wake. And as the lightning flashed once more across the volcanic plains, illuminating the city's jagged skyline, those who watched from the shadows whispered a single truth they could never unlearn. The apex predator had bowed. Not to gods, not to war chiefs, but to a human who had once shown it kindness in its darkest hour. And the galaxy would never be the same again.